Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks again for joining us for another edition of Ask an Ambassador. My name is Lynn Larson, Director of Student Recruitment for the College of Engineering here at UTA. Thanks for spending some time with us this afternoon. We are going to be talking about grit and self-advocacy today. And in order to help us understand that, we have one of our more experienced and brightest student ambassadors with us today. Ishrat, would you like to introduce yourself? How long have you been at UTA? What have you been studying? And then give me a definition of grit.
Cool. Well, thank you for that introduction. Hi guys, my name is Ishrat. I got my undergrad at UTA in electrical engineering and math. And I am currently getting my master's in biomedical engineering. So as Lynn said, I've been here a while and I'm a little experienced. And so to me, grit means keep working on something even if you are not sure that you'll be successful in it.
Okay, so it's like never giving up. It's like the little engine that could, right? Going up that hill, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got some questions for you. Well, before we get to the questions, can you define self-advocacy for me?
Yeah. For me, it personally means, standing up for yourself and for all that you've accomplished and all that you are going to accomplish. And, it's in the academic setting, it's not letting a teacher or a professor or a TA, give you less than what you feel like you deserve.
Right. Oops. Okay, so let me start asking you some questions. Let's see, I'm trying to start at the top. Okay, what happens if I fail a class? I know you've never failed a class, as far as I know, but what happens if you do fail a class?
You just roll with it. You see why you failed and you list how you're going to do better and you repeat the class and you make an A and you just go from there.
All right, so it's that easy, right? So is there a limit to how many classes I can fail as an engineering student? Do you know?
Yes. After 3 classes, you will unfortunately not be allowed to continue into the professional program.
Okay, so it's 3 classes. Oops, I keep doing that. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to get my screen back. So I can fail 3 different classes or the same class 3 times, but the maximum is 3. And then I have to change my major. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So how would a student deal with failure and how to overcome that feeling of I'm no good?
So yeah, like I just outlined, you learn from it. It's easier said than done. I've had friends who failed classes and it's one of the worst feelings in the world. You feel so small, but at the end of the day, you have to understand that failure is a part of life. And, how do we learn? We learn by failing. For example, one of my professors this semester, he gives out quizzes. And one of the quiz questions actually showed up on our midterm. And the reason I knew that quiz question and the answer so well was because I missed that question on my quiz. I missed it. And so because of the fact that I didn't know it and I basically failed at answering that question, it made me, learn the material a little bit better. And so that in the future, when it came time to take my midterm, I was able to answer the question accurately and with 100%, I knew I was going to get this right. And so you just have to, like I said, failure is a part of life and you just have to, take that blow and see why it happened. Did you not understand the material? Were you working? Did you not put enough time towards the class? Did where did it go wrong? And when you identify where it went wrong, that's when, you start building your plan for next semester. Say, okay, well, I'm going to take this class again, but this time I'm going to go to the math, like, let's say it's for like a math class. Say, I'm going to go to the math clinic for 2 hours every day so that I can better understand this. Or, if it's for an engineering class, say, I'm going to get a head start. Well, I've already know like what material is going to be covered. I'm going to get a head start for next semester and take notes and, do like, give myself like an advantage by studying beforehand. And I mean, sometimes the same professors will teach the class and their teaching style. And so
Right.
you just have to identify your deficit, fix that deficit, and then, hopefully you'll get the outcome that you're looking for.
Awesome. That sounds great. So if I fail a class, can I still be an engineer?
I mean, of course you can. So, a lot of great engineers have failed before us. I think Steve Jobs, the first couple of college classes he took, he didn't do well in them, and he built like a successful company like Apple. And
Right.
I think in our society, failure has like a stigma associated with it, but a lot of failures lead to like great success. Like look at Edison. He like went through 100 different designs for the incandescent light bulb, and it took him 100 different tries, but he found it. So he failed like 100 times, but he still kept going. And so I think that's another thing with engineering too. Like these classes, they get hard. Like the material gets difficult, and when you're in these upper level classes, and the class sizes get a little bit smaller, the professor may not curve, or just the material is just so difficult. Sometimes it gets hard to manage, and with everything that like a college student could potentially have going on with other classes, their personal life, if they work a job, other issues, it can be difficult to keep up. And sometimes, you might slip and you may not get the grade that you want, but it's not the end of the world. It's something that can be, you can seek out the help that you need,
Right.
and you can fix it, and you can get back on the path that you need to be on.
Yeah.
Or what?
So I'm going to share something that very few people know about me. My degree is in Asian history, right? I have 2 Fs on my transcript. 2, right? And it didn't stop me from the successful career I've had doing what I am doing. I wasn't proud of it, and I was really devastated. And then I looked back at what else was going on in my life when I received those 2 Fs. And it made sense because I was like working way too many hours because I had to put myself through school and not really getting along with the same professor who gave me both Fs. He was later terminated, which was okay by me. But yeah, it's not something that is going to affect you your entire life, right? It'll affect you maybe for a semester and then it's gone, right? So you just like have to persevere and just, use that grit and pull yourself up, and, you're better than a grade, which is, I think, kind of what message I'm trying to relate to you. You are so much better than a grade, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So if I fail, and I know you've already talked about this, but maybe you can delve into it a little bit more. What can you do to feel like you're successful? I mean, you can retake the class, but are there any other hints or experiences that you or your classmates have experienced after failure that help them be successful?
Yeah. So one of my friends who took differential equations with me and unfortunately had to repeat it, he was like really good at coding. And so we were in Moby together, which is like a club that does coding, and they meet like Friday nights. And he was really good at coding, and he actually ended up doing a hackathon at SMU, and he did really, really well. I think he got like second place, and he got to like talk with like people at AT&T, people at Bell, and people at like Lockheed. And so that's kind of like how he made himself feel better. He after that failing grade, he took it in stride and he did something that he was really good at that kind of gave him that little confidence boost. Like, hey, you know, that area, it's not my area, but look at how much of a good programmer I am. And, you know, ultimately, I think he now works for TI, but he got a great job. And I mean, he got an F on his.
Yeah.
And so you like, personally for me, if I do bad on a midterm or anything, I go do something that I'm really good at, or like I go spend time like with someone from my support system, like either my significant other, my best friend, or like, you know, even my dogs, because at the end of the day, you have to realize that you're not going to do well at everything you try. And sometimes, you know, it's okay to fail and just go bounce back from it. Go hang out with your friend, go play video game or do something that you're good at that will, you know, make you feel like, hey, I am good at something. And even though circuits or whatever it might not be it, I am good enough to be here, I guess.
Right.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing is just because you fail a class, you yourself as a person are not a failure, right?
But see, like students, they can't wrap their head around that.
Yeah, it is hard to wrap your head around that, right? I mean, it's hard to not take it like super personally and really get down about it, right? It's like, you know, when your best friend moves away and you miss them so much, you're just kind of like, for a really long time, right? But eventually, you know, you find ways of keeping that friendship alive. You know, we're all doing it now with Zoom and Teams and FaceTime and all that kind of stuff, right? But you are going to find success even after, you know, a failure or whatever. And I think one of the things that is really important is knowing the kinds of you know, who you can turn to help for and resources, which I'll get to in a couple of minutes. But before we get there, so success is not a one-way path.
No, it definitely isn't. And you know, that's very like when I entered college, I always thought success was like totally like linear, one shot, like, you know, it's that graph that goes up. But honestly, it isn't. It's like it's like, oh, it's a little crazy, it's a little hectic. To be honest, I never thought I would be an engineering student. I was originally a biology student. Like I liked my engineering friends and I was like, oh, they're so smart. I'm never gonna do what they do. And then like a couple of years later, oh hey, can I borrow some engineering paper? Like, you know, we always think that things are gonna go one way, but sometimes life takes a turn and, you know, I feel like whatever happens to us in life happens for a reason. That's what my parents always taught me. And I can, you know, definitely see that. And I'm really glad I did engineering. It's definitely changed like my perspective on life and like the way I see things. And I think it's hopefully like next fall when I go to medical school, I think it'll make me a better physician. And it took me a while to get there, but I got there. And recently I've just been learning that success is the journey and not the destination.
Wow.
So that's the mindset that I'm trying to go with.
I think you ought to put that on t-shirts and then market it, right?
That's what one of my friends told me, and it's really good. And she's like, you know, we all wish like you want to go to medical school, and then you think, oh, that's the goal. But then when you get to medical school, you're like, oh, I want to pass my test. Then that's another goal. And then it's just like you always keep building. Like you never, even though you get there, there's always something else to be done. And so it's just enjoying that whole getting there versus just getting there and being like, oh, hey, I got here. It's how you got there that matters the most.
Yeah, it's kind of on the same line as there's that other tagline. It's the journey that counts, not the destination.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah, you just kind of, you know, weave around and all over, and you know, it's I keep thinking about that. You know, it's especially these days that we all have a little bit of extra time to actually think about, you know, where we're at and what really matters, right?
Yeah.
And what is just garbage that you can just like leave behind, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, she made a great point because she was just like, you never thought you would finish your electrical engineering degree, but now you're finished and now you're getting your master's in a couple of months. And she's like, you never consider like the journey of, because originally like electrical engineering was very hard for me. I had a difficult time with it when I took circuits. Oof.
I hear that from a
people,
lot of electrical engineering students.
a lot of people struggled, and there were like some days I was like, I can always go back to biology and get that degree and call it a day. And it really, like, there were just some days like it really sucked because for circuits my homework would be like 30-40 pages because each problem it would take like 5 pages, and it was so much. And then getting like a bad grade on that homework when you spent like so much time on it is like so hard to take in. But like at the end of the day, you got to keep going, because like one thing in physics that I really liked, and one thing that like really stuck with me, it's harder to move something that's stationary versus something that's already moving. So even if you do poorly, as long as you keep moving, keep like working on, oh, well, I missed this because of this. Okay, well, I didn't do the mesh law right here. And so as long as you keep moving forward, I think, you'll ultimately get to your goal, versus if you become like stationary and static, because then it's more difficult. So
Interesting. So that reminds me of something one of my fellow travelers told me many years ago. When you're walking in cities outside of the US where traffic is just crazy and mishmash and going all over. So if any of you students have been to, Mumbai or Cairo or Kathmandu or any Vietnam, it's like if you need to cross the street and there isn't a crosswalk, the rule is as long as you're moving, you're not going to get hit. You just have to sort of weave in and out, right, of the moving traffic and just keep going. And I think that's the same for like being a student, like you said, like getting through that sort of varied path to get to, getting the homework assignment done, no matter how many hours it takes, or making sure that you've studied enough to take that next exam, right? So it's just forward motion. Just keep moving, Yeah. And don't just stand still paralyzed because, you got a bad grade, right?
Yeah.
You can be paralyzed for a couple hours, but then, go for a walk and life will go on.
Yeah. Life definitely goes on.
Yeah. So if you fail a class, what are your chances of getting into grad school or getting a job in your profession? Do you have any idea? How would you address that?
I would say it's still high. If you fail a class, you may not be going to MIT or Stanford, but you can go to a good school. You can go to UT Austin, you can go to UTD, SMU. Like, there's a lot of schools that will, accept you.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe like if you want like one of the top tier schools, maybe, you hurt your chances a little bit. But who knows, if you meet the right people, if you have the right letters of recommendation, if your research is the correct thing, like you never know like how life works.
Mm-hmm.
And don't ever like count yourself out, because like especially with engineering, there was a class that I had last semester, and I was on the verge of A, B, and it was so annoying. And then finally I was just like, man, I'm gonna get a B in this class. And then on my final, I ended up doing really, really, really well, and I got like I think I got close to like a 97 on my final, and then I ended up with an A in this class, and I was so happy. And like before, like I was just like, well, I can still I'm probably gonna get a B, which is fine. Like, it's okay. I don't want a B, but it's fine. Like, I worked hard, and I'm gonna work hard through this final. And so worked hard on the final, did well, and then boom, And so you never know like the different things that will happen. And so just don't ever count yourself out and stop like working hard, because that's when, that might be just like the little push that you need.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, no, that's true, and it's not going to, like I said, you are as a student more than a grade, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, there's also, having worked in admissions offices for years and years and years, you know, there's always a section on that application that says, is there something in addition to what you've already told us that you need to tell us? So, you know, if you got that D or F in, say, Calc 2, right, your sophomore year, and the reason you got that 1 D or F is because for the last 3 weeks of class, you know, you were sick, or, you know, you couldn't be at school for a reason, you know, a family circumstance, or, you know, you, whatever, you know, we would look at that and say, oh, well, that explains, you know, this kid was doing so well and on this upward trajectory, right? And then this one class, it's like, boop, but here's the reason for it, you know. So people, professional people, graduate school people, I mean, they will look at that. So like we keep saying, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and so that's interesting that you brought it up. One of the med schools I applied to, actually, there was like a section, and it asked, like, you know, in addition, what would you like us to know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of explained why I switched degrees. Why did I go the engineering route? And when I was doing my interview, my interviewer actually said that they really liked the story behind it, and they liked the reason, and it showed a little bit more that I can be flexible and go from doing something I know to doing something I don't know completely at all, and still do well. And so yeah, they were really impressed by it.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, talking about med school, I tell students that it doesn't really matter what academic major you have to apply to med school, as long as you've worked with your advisor to take the science and math classes that qualify you for med school. You know, so you can study international relations or environmental science or anthropology or English or music and still get into med school, because med schools are looking for people with different backgrounds. And obviously, Ishrat, your background is a little bit different than, you know, the kid who took chemistry and biology in college, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's awesome. So let's suppose that I'm kind of floundering, and mom and dad aren't around to, you know, problem solve, you know, the way I'm feeling, or, you know, aren't around to help me with study skills or things like that. Who can I go to for help?
Yeah, so at UTA, on the library and the second floor, there's an ideas center, and there's like peer leaders there who are there to help you. They'll tutor you. There's tutoring offered for various different subjects. Excuse me, a majority of them, I believe, are like, you know, your prereqs, like a lot of your like beginning classes, like English, history, and things like that. But they also offer seminars on like study skills and like time organization and like how to build good study habits and things like that. And so you can also make like a one-on-one appointment with them and say, hey, you know, I'm an electrical engineering major. This is my schedule. This is like the homework I have. Like, I'm kind of struggling. Can you help me out? Like, you know, develop a study schedule so I can allocate my time properly, so I can get everything done. And also, you can reach out to your TAs. Like, the TAs at UTA have always been super duper great to me, and they're so friendly. And you can also reach out to your professors. Like, professors, they might seem daunting and mean during lecture, but they're actually very nice. And you know, they do care about their students, or else they wouldn't teach. And so, you know, you can sit down with them and say, hey, you know, I'm kind of struggling in your class. Like, what can I do as a student to, you know, not be on the struggle bus, so that I can be on the success bus, you know? And sometimes professor will be like, okay, yeah, you know, like, focus on these types of problems, focus on like critical thinking types of problems and things like that. And like, there's been one professor who actually sent me like links to YouTube, and he's like, okay, you know, like, since you don't have a background in this, look through these videos. This will help clear what we're discussing in class. And so the sources of help are there, but I think sometimes, like, engineering students, we kind of get stubborn and think, oh, you know, I can get myself out of this, and we don't ask for the help. But sometimes it's, you know, you need help, like, it's okay to ask for that help, because it'll ultimately help you be successful.
Yeah, so if you're going to be your own self-advocate, right, And if you realize you are having problems, the best thing you can do for yourself is ask for help. I mean, the absolute best thing you can do, because I'm also thinking about some of the other resources that are available for students, like the math lab and the physics lab. And, you know, there's even an accounting lab. So, you know, they can teach you how to balance your checkbook, if you even know what that is, or, you know, make sure you're not overspending your bank account, right? And so these are also things that could cause anxiety and stress, right? So being able to realize you need the help, and then having the strength, the inner strength to ask for that help. You know, it's not always easy, especially since a lot of engineering students are introverts and not so much extroverts. That's also kind of an issue that I know some students are dealing with. You know, but so Ishrat, besides the Ideas Lab, what resources have you used in your time as a UTA student?
I'm a big fan of the math clinic. I love the tutors there. I love what they do. So if you guys aren't familiar, the math clinic is located on the 4th floor of Pickard Hall, which is a triangular building right next to the parking garage. And it is like a phenomenal place. They have all like the current like textbooks that are being utilized for math classes. And they also have a bunch of tutors who have either received an A or a B in for which they're tutoring. And a lot of them are like PhD students, master students. They're very, very smart. And so they can definitely, you know, help you and help you learn the material, because sometimes like the way professors teach things may not be the right way for you. And so you just need to see it from a different perspective. Like, you know, like they're just saying there's multiple ways to skin a cat. Your professor might skin it this way, but like the math clinic might show you a different way. And so as you get into like the higher learning, kind of like higher math, I think that really helps, because like just approaching those problems, sometimes you'll learn that there's like a really long way, and then there's sometimes short way. And so sometimes, like, you know, the math clinic tutors will teach you those little shortcuts you need in order to do well and save you time on your midterm, because all the tests that I've had so far, they have a time limit. You know, you don't get to exceed the hour and 30 minutes or whatever for the class. And so knowing those little tricks and things will definitely help you. And also a lot of these tutors have taken the same professors as you, so they kind of know how the professor tests. Like one of the tutors told me that this professor that I had for Calc 2 really, really liked series and sequences. Like that was her favorite thing. And he's like, she's going to ask you a question about this, this, and this. And on the midterm, of course, there was this, this, and this. And so, you know, it really helps. And also I've been to the physics clinic. They've been very helpful as well. Actually, my dad taught me a lot of physics, so I was actually pretty good at it. So I didn't really utilize the physics clinic a lot, but a lot of my friends did. And they said the tutors really helped them. One of my friends actually went there and got tutoring to help her with her MCAT physics section. And there's also a writing center. If you're ever struggling with writing papers or writing lab reports and things. And so you can make an appointment. I believe that's located on I want to say on the 4th floor of the library, the 3rd or 4th floor. It's kind of like catty corner in the back. And yeah, like with the math clinic, these are English majors who are, you know, employed to help you with your papers and things like that. And they do a really great job. So
that's awesome. It's great that, you know, you've used your personal experiences and then experiences of your friends to explain, you know, all the different options that there are. I do want to mention that next Tuesday during the lunchtime brown bag, someone from the Ideas Center is going to be presenting. So if you want to find out more about that, put that on your schedule, 12 o'clock Tuesday, right here in Teams with a bunch of really cool people. So I think that's a really good thing. So I know that being a student can be stressful. And if you're struggling with, you know, working and studying under our current circumstances because of COVID, and, you know, things change so rapidly in our world right now, and you're doing everything on Zoom and on Teams, and you're just like not doing as well as a student and you're just feeling sort of this angst. What kind of mental health services are there available to students?
Yeah, so the UT Arlington has a CAP center, which is Counseling and Psychological Services. And if you're a freshman, you get 6 hours free. And after that, it's like a prorated rate. And anybody can take advantage of this. You can make, I believe you can make a like Microsoft Teams appointment. And also another cool thing, the School of Social Work, they've also, a lot of their students have been calling like other UT Arlington students and asking them, hey, are you doing well? Is there anything that we can help you with? And things like that. And yeah, because they called me last week and I was very surprised, but they're like, she explained it to me and they're doing it for all the UT Arlington students. They're reaching out to them. And so you have those two options.
Wow.
And, yeah. And so, yeah, so, you can make an appointment with the counseling services and, get that help that you need, because with everything going on in the pandemic, it's easy to get down. Like there are days like where my only human contact is with the Microsoft Teams meetings for class. And it's just like, oh my gosh, and the world is a little bit different. And so, just adjusting to it, sometimes we just might need a little help. And so that help is definitely there. There's a lot of stigma associated with mental health, but it is very, very important. It's, as important as your physical health, because if you're not mentally healthy, then, it takes a toll on your physical level. And so just having a balance with those, especially now, because like you said, it is difficult. Like I personally haven't encountered it, but I've heard stories like one of my friends is taking a math class and learning math online and like putting like the answers to questions online. It can be really tedious. Like I think she said her answer wasn't accept. The answer was 1/2. So she put in 1/2, but the correct answer was 0.5. And so her answer wasn't right, technically.
Wow.
And so
that's like splitting hairs,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really irritating because like sometimes the programs are made in a certain way like that. And so especially with like engineering too, like, just like sometimes like the quizzes, like the format gets like kind of put off. And so then the answers like, cause like I had one quiz where the formatting was off. So the answer was off by 1. And I got a 10 on this quiz. And I'm like, I did not do that bad on this quiz. Like I knew what I was doing. And so, yeah, like the formatting was off by, and it gets really kind of like stressful because my professor, like, he's like, oh, I'll fix it at the end of the semester. But I'm just like, okay, well, your class has a failing average. Will you please fix it soon? Because it's kind of stressful to see that. But, like just taking care of mental health is really important. And I think there's also a lot of resources online and a lot of like insurance companies are offering a lot more telemed options for counseling.
Yeah, and I think it's important, because those services, through as a staff member, I know that I'm getting more and more information from my insurer and from, articles put out in the Mavwire and other places, of getting rid of the stigma of mental health. I was reading something earlier this week in, I think, the Chronicle for Higher Ed. I think that's where it was, where it said that 1 in 3 students, current college students, are grappling with some kind of depression, angst, feeling of non-self-worth, things like that, and how we as staff members and faculty and even, fellow students need to be aware of kind of the signs of students like not doing as well as we think that they're doing. Maybe the student was really excited about going to class, at the first 5 weeks that class was in session, and then they kind of slowly started stopping going to class, or maybe they're not eating as well as they should be. Maybe they're sleeping longer hours. Maybe they've disconnected from their circle of friends. These are like things that we can see, and reach out to those students or let somebody know who would be better at reaching out to those students just to make sure they're okay. It is a really important thing, and there's still that kind of stigma, but talking to a professional, whether it is a social work student and this is what they're being trained to do, right, or a counselor available at CAPS, it's really going to help.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just it's really a smart thing to do. I mean, I went through a period of my life that I was struggling as a young adult, and went to this fabulous counselor that really taught me my own self-worth. Kind of that, okay, I'm a real adult now, I'm out of school, this isn't the job I want, just everything was sort of crumbling, and it really helped. And at first I was embarrassed, but now I realized that it really did kind of put me on this path towards future success.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we all need help. Like, some people aren't as, like, they don't advertise it, but and I think right now more than ever, because what you mentioned, like what college students are going through, I can definitely see that, like, a lot with a lot of my friends, and especially with a lot of my international friends who are like students here, and they're like working on their PhDs, and they're like, like, what's going on, like what's going to go on. And another thing that, like, I really surprised me, like, food insecurity is on the rise among college students, because of, like, campuses being closed and being limited. Like, a lot of them depend on, like, that financial aid money and, like, the food package that they buy for the semester. And so, and the cool thing about UT Arlington is, if you do, like, have any problems with that, I believe there's a food bank, and there's the Tri-C also has, like, resources, and they have a food pantry that you can go to every Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon,
right,
and you can get what you need. So that's definitely, I think, a cool little resource we have.
Yeah, because there's no reason for students to go hungry or not have a safe place to stay, right? Those are also really important, and we realize that a lot of students are struggling with those exact issues, or their family has lost jobs or has been forced to move and things like that. I mean, that all will affect a student, and we understand that. So even just talking about it amongst your close friends is also a really good resource, right? For you to have to just share that experience, so it's all the weight is not on your shoulders. You're releasing some of that, which is, I think, really important. Yeah. So speaking of friends, and I know I have felt this way on many occasions throughout my entire life, and sometimes still do, my friends make everything look so easy. Why can't it be easy for me? Like, how do you deal with that kind of feeling? I want to hear your thoughts first.
Yeah, like, I've had a bunch of friends, like, they're just so smart. Like, they would go to class, they'd listen to the same lecture I would, like, they wouldn't take notes, and then they would do way better than me on the midterm, and I'm like, what is going on? I've studied, I've done this, I've done that. Like, what do you know that I don't know? And it just, you are you and they are them, and that's all I can say. That's what I've kind of learned, because I can just complain and huff and puff about it, but at the end of the day, it won't change my grade, And, sometimes some people, they do make things look easy, but in the background, they are probably studying their butt off when you're not looking.
Yeah.
And then they'll say, oh, yeah, I didn't study. And I'm just like, no, I saw you on the 6th floor of the library. I saw you studying. Don't lie. But, like, you never know what's going on. Like, sometimes, like I said, like, some people can be misleading, and they say, oh, yeah, I never study. But they're, like, studying, like, deep into the night. And so, you can't really compare yourself with other people. And it's really easy to do. And I've done it myself, like, millions of times. Like, especially, like, when I first started engineering, like, I took my first circuits class, and I thought I was well prepared. And then the professor was like, here. And I'm like, here. And I'm just like, oh. And then, like, these kids, like everyone's doing so well, and I'm like, oh man, I'm not doing that well. Is this the right major for me? And so, it's easy to get caught up in that and compare yourself to others. But at the end of the day, you have your own story and they have theirs, and it's not really fair to compare because they may have something going on in their life you don't know about, and you might have something going on. And so everybody's just different. And yes, they make it look easy, but at the end of the day, if it's not easy for you, you got to put in that hard work so it can be easy for you.
Yeah. So I was going to say it's not a competition, because you're probably doing something better than what your friends are doing, maybe in an area. Like I had a friend in college who was super, super good with languages. And I mean, she was taking like 3 different languages at the same time. And I was struggling with one, but I was a much better history student than she was. So we had this deal, right? That if she was better at the languages, she would help me with the language that we were studying together, and I would help her get through history, right? So that's another way of kind of like easing that feeling of competition, or, oh my gosh, they're just so much better than I am, I'm never going to get there, thinking of some kind of mutually advantageous relationship and making that happen.
That's funny that you mentioned that. My friend who helped me in circuits, actually, he liked one of my other friends, and he said if I introduced him to her, then he would tutor me through circuits 1 and 2. So that was the best deal I ever made at UTA. It was like a 500% win for me. And like with it can be like really small things. Like I remember in my statics and dynamics class, I was kind of struggling, and so one of the students who was in the class was having a difficulty writing papers, as English wasn't their first language. I'm like, hey, I'll help you with your paper. And in turn, they helped me with my statics and dynamics class and explained, like, a lot of the concepts that I wasn't getting. And so,
yeah, I know there are ways of figuring that out. It's like I also have a friend who's a much better dancer than I am, so I know that that's not a competition.
yeah.
But I'm a better cook, so it all works out, right?
Yeah.
So this is kind of a hard question, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to it. So let's look at it from a couple of different viewpoints. When you're struggling and when it seems, like you're never going to get over that mountain that you're trying to climb, right? How do you know if it's time to quit? And think about that for a minute, because I'm also kind of thinking of times that I've had to quit a project and why, right?
Yeah. So let me give you, so I thought I was going to go from biology, getting my BS in biology, to medical school.
Okay.
That, of course, did not happen. I switched paths. I went and got 2 engineering degrees and a math degree. And so there were a lot of like days I was just like, is medicine right for me still? Is medicine right for me still? Like I can go work in industry and not go through all that schooling, and I can make very good money. I can go get my PhD. I can go work in industry, and and there were some days I was just like, maybe is this time to give up that dream of medicine? Like, and I think you have to look at the bigger picture. What do you want to achieve? And so for me, I've always wanted to go to med school. There is no other job in the world that I would have, like, that I would want. And, with an engineering degree, you can do a vast majority of things. Like, I can go to law school. I can go, like I said, get my PhD. I can go work in industry. Like, there's various routes available. But at the end of the day, you just have to truly kind of have to sit down and ask yourself, would I be okay giving up on what I've done? And if you can't, then, I mean, that's fine. It's okay. Go do something different. But if you can't, then continue with what you're doing, because even though you're struggling, like, that hard work will one day pay off, like, for sure. And and if it's something that you like, then go do it, because you see all these people, like, you'll meet people who don't, you can tell they don't like their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
They're just so miserable. And like with our like current, state of like the world, like the average life expectancy has gone up because we're so industrialized and we have like, improved healthcare and all, well, with COVID and everything. But you're going to live for a good, like, into your 70s, 80s, and it's not really worth it to be doing something where you're just punching in and punching out 8 to 5 and just be miserable. So for me, even if it takes a little bit longer, I would say pursue what you love. And if it's something that you truly do want, then continue with it, even if it doesn't seem possible.
Mm-hmm.
Just work hard, do all that you can do, take a little bit of risk, and and the optimist in me thinks that the stars would align and you would reap the benefit of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, because it's really hard when you've put like your heart and soul right into something that is like you think is your one passion, right? Yeah. And then the mountain starts crumbling and it's like, okay, it's time for me to like sit back, reevaluate, and figure out what my next step should be, right? So for me, again, going back to, and I just thought about this, going back to being in college, my original major was Japanese language. Great, Japanese language. I spent a year in Japan right before I entered college. I had no Japanese when I got there. I learned it. It was a struggle, but that's what I was going to do. And I wanted to get good enough to translate recent novels from Japanese into English, not English into Japanese, because that's much harder, right? And so this was what I was going to do. And I went in to talk to my academic advisor, who was a graduate student, and she told me that they had made a curricular change in the bachelor degree, where in order to do the translation part, I would now have to take 2 years of Chinese along with the Japanese language. Now, Chinese, Japanese uses the same characters. They stole the characters from China because they didn't have their own written language. So a lot of the characters, or kanji in Japanese, are the same, but they all have different sounds and, this and that, and you put 2 different of these characters together and it can mean one thing in Japanese and something different in Chinese. And I just really was not going to do that. And I really didn't know where to go, right? I mean, this was like just a blow. Like, oh my gosh, how can you do that? I'm already in my 2nd year. Like, yeah, I don't know, right? So I decided to go into Asian history, or Asian studies, which I was one of the only non-Asian students in that major. So that also made it really interesting. And I was encouraged to rethink that decision and give it up, but I persevered and was successful in it. But it was kind of one of those things where I really wanted to do one thing and that kind of just fell apart, and I just turned it around to do something else, which actually for me ended up being a much better thing. It didn't seem like it at the time, but many years later, my Japanese is horrible now because I haven't really kept it up, but having that kind of experience really helped me, get on the path that I am on, which, hopefully will continue to go forward. I think it's not only schoolwork when you have to determine when it's time to quit, but it's other things in your life as well. Would you agree with that, Ishrat?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of our engineering students, they're working professionals. They have families, and like they also need to take that into consideration. Mm-hmm. I know this one gentleman I went to school with, he was determined to get his PhD in electrical engineering, and nothing was going to stop him. And it was just super great, like just how he kind of like honed his family life around everything. Like he would bring his kids with him, and like they would sit at a table outside our lab, and he would sit so he could view them. So like, you know, he did everything he could to like make his dream like work. And so, you know, you got to be flexible, but you also, like you said, you also have to be feasible too, I guess. And that's one thing I should have mentioned. Like, you know, if your goal is to like become a mechanical engineer and you're like failing all those hard classes, then you might need to kind of like re-look at things a little bit and see, is it like, are you just not understanding the material, or like what's going on? Because, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And like, it's great to be passionate, but like also like you just have to also consider, like, you know, is it feasible for me to continue going this path?
Right.
And so, you know, because like as engineers, like when we design an idea, we have to see the feasibility of it. You know, like, is it as efficient as it can be? And so, you know, you have to kind of take those teachings into effect as well. But I do think, like, you know, if you're at that point where you're like, oh, should I give up? If it's something you're truly passionate about, then keep going with it. But if there's any doubt in your mind, then, you know, like you said, evaluate your circumstances and see if it's worth going for, or, you know, if a different route is possible.
Yeah. And I think that's right. You know, just to kind of, you know, take a step back, evaluate, you know, even make a list on a legal pad, you know, the pros and the cons, right? And just write everything out. Sometimes that also helps, you know, if you're trying to decide if it's time to go another path or persevere and keep moving forward, because whichever direction you go, you are still going to be moving forward, right? You're not just going to stop. Right. So I think that's super, super important. I do want to bring up a couple of things. And for those of you who've been here before, this is our contact information, and I'll leave it up here for a minute. In case you want to get a hold of me, that's my contact information. And we have 7 engineering student ambassadors. They are in, I think, 5 of our 7 engineering offerings. If you have a question and you didn't want to say, you know, write it down today, or, you know, you'd rather have a one-on-one, write to them at the email address beanengineer@uta.edu and set up an appointment with them. They are on Teams. They can set up a phone call appointment or a virtual appointment with you Monday through Friday, anytime between 9 and 5. The only exception is Fridays from 9 to 10, we have our ambassador update meetings, so they would not be available at that time. But we really encourage you to reach out to them, find out, you know, how did they make it through their struggles? You know, was there a time that they had to give up? How did they keep themselves mentally and physically healthy? Ask them what student organizations they belong to or where they lived on campus. They're going to be just an unending bucket of information that they would be willing to share with you. I also want to remind you again, next Tuesday, the Brown Bag at 12 is going to be a presentation by people from the Ideas Office, which I think would be super awesome. I think I'm going to see if I can fit that into my schedule to see if I can find out more about that, resource that's available to students. And then next week, at this time on Thursday, we're going to have a discussion about the importance of maintaining a healthy mind, body, and spirit, which I think we've kind of been touching on over the last couple of weeks because we realize it is so important for all of you to keep that in mind. So we're going to delve into that a little bit deeper on next Thursday. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Definitely want to encourage you all to look at this again. It will be taped. We also have some snippets going up on IGTV, on the UTA Engineering Mavericks page or channel, I guess, on IGTV. So that's kind of exciting. And we just really thank you for spending some time with us today. So Any last words of wisdom, Ishrat, that you would like to partake?
Just believe in yourself and fail often and learn from it and just be better.
Yeah, I look at failure as a learning experience, right? You know, at first it may be a slap in your face, but it's really a learning experience and you're going to grow from it. So just don't give up, you know. Just keep on going down that path, and do ask for help if you need it, right? That's the self-advocacy part that I don't think we stress enough, is that there are resources. As I said earlier, mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and your aunts and uncles aren't there for you 24/7. You know, you are a young adult, and it's hard to learn to stand up on your own 2 feet, but it's possible. So we really encourage you to speak up for yourself, and don't be afraid to do so, because there's going to be an answer out there for you. And we just really appreciate all of your time with us today. Hope to see you next week.